The notification sound pinged on my phone at exactly 3:47 a.m. But I was already awake, staring at my laptop screen in the converted garage that doubled as my bedroom and studio. The email subject line made my hand shake. "Congratulations, Maya. Your channel has reached 10 million subscribers." 10 million. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Just 18 months ago, my sister Jessica had stood in this exact spot, pointing at my setup with her perfectly manicured nails, laughing so hard she could barely speak. "Maya's talking to her computer friends again," she'd announced to our parents, who were visiting my garage studio for the first and last time. "She thinks PixelDreamer and BookwormBeth are real people. Like, actual friends." My mom had picked up my world's Okayest Gamer coffee mug, the one my online friend Alex had sent me from Canada, and shook her head with that disappointed smile I knew too well. "Honey, you need to make real connections. These internet people aren't actually your friends. They don't even know your real name." That night, I'd cried myself to sleep on the air mattress in the corner, surrounded by the gaming posters and fairy lights that made my garage feel like home. Now, as I stared at that subscriber count, I wondered what they'd say if they knew that those same imaginary friends had helped me build something bigger than any of them could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Maya Chen, and if you're watching this from your own small space, feeling like nobody understands what you're building, this story is for you. Because sometimes the people who call your dreams imaginary are the ones who lack the imagination to see what's possible. The garage studio where I recorded my first YouTube video wasn't much to look at. My parents had reluctantly let me move my bed out there when I turned 20, partly because I'd begged for months and partly because they were tired of hearing my late-night gaming sessions through the thin walls. The space was cramped, with concrete floors that stayed cold even in California summers, and a single window that looked out onto our neighbor's fence. I'd hung tapestries to cover the exposed insulation and strung Christmas lights around the ceiling to make it feel less like a storage unit and more like a creative sanctuary. My setup was humble to say the least. A hand-me-down gaming laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up, a webcam I'd borrowed from my community college's media lab and somehow never returned, and a phone tripod I'd bought at a garage sale for $3. The audio was terrible, the lighting was worse, and my first few videos were so awkward I could barely watch them back. But I kept going because of the community I'd found online. People who understood that sometimes your real family isn't the one you're born into. I discovered Discord through a Reddit thread about indie games, and slowly started joining different servers where people talked about everything from pixel art to philosophy. That's where I met PixelDreamer, whose real name was Alex, a graphic designer from Toronto who worked night shifts and spent his free time creating digital art that looked like dreams made visual. There was BookwormBeth, a librarian from Oregon who recommended books that changed my perspective on everything, and Music Mike, a producer from Atlanta who made beats that somehow captured exactly how I felt about life. These weren't just usernames to me. They were people who remembered my coffee order, who checked in when I was stressed about exams, who celebrated when I finally saved enough money to upgrade my webcam. The contrast between my online world and my family life couldn't have been sharper. Upstairs in the main house, my sister Jessica had transformed her bedroom into what she called her, quote, content creation headquarters. Ring lights, professional cameras, a editing setup that cost more than my car, and a walk-in closet organized by color for her outfit posts. She'd started her beauty and lifestyle channel 6 months before I launched mine, and while she had better equipment and our parents' full support, her subscriber count stubbornly hovered around 800. Jessica's content was polished, perfectly lit, and completely hollow. She followed every trend, copied every viral format, and spoke in the same cheerful influencer voice that 1,000 other creators used. Our parents saw her professional setup and assumed she was the one destined for social media success. Meanwhile, I was down in the garage, talking to my laptop about video games and life advice, building something that felt authentic even if it looked amateur. My early videos were rough around the edges, but they were real. I talked about struggling with social anxiety, about feeling like an outsider in traditional social settings, about finding community in unexpected places. I shared gaming tutorials for people who felt intimidated by the hardcore gaming scene, and I did these segments I called Coffee Chat Mondays, where I'd just drink my morning coffee and talk about whatever was on my mind, usually with one of my online friends joining via voice chat. The family dynamics were predictable and painful. Every Sunday we'd have dinner together in the main house, and inevitably the conversation would turn to what Jessica and I were doing with our lives. Jessica would update everyone on her latest brand collaboration attempts and her plans to grow her Instagram following. She spoke about social media like it was a legitimate business, discussing engagement rates and algorithm changes with the confidence of someone who'd watched a dozen YouTube tutorials on the subject. Our parents hung on every word, asking thoughtful questions about her content strategy and nodding approvingly when she mentioned networking with other local influencers. When the conversation turned to me, the energy shifted entirely. "Maya's still doing her little computer thing," my mom would say, not unkindly but with the tone people use when discussing a child's imaginary friend. "She talks to people online all day." My dad, ever practical, would launch into his weekly lecture about the importance of face-to-face networking and building real professional relationships. "You can't put internet friends on a resume, Maya. You need to think about your future." They meant well, in their own way, but their concern felt like condescension. They saw my online friendships as a phase I'd outgrow, like a teenager's obsession with a boy band. Jessica's attitude was the hardest to stomach because it came wrapped in sibling rivalry and genuine bewilderment. She couldn't understand why I'd spend hours talking to people I'd never met in person when I could be out building a real social media presence like hers. "You're wasting your talent," she'd tell me, usually while adjusting her ring light for the 100th time that day. "You're actually funny and smart, but you're throwing it away on these random internet people who probably aren't even who they say they are. Like, how do you know PixelDreamer isn't some creepy old man?" The accusation stung because it revealed how little she understood about the relationships I'd built. These weren't random strangers I'd met in chat rooms. They were people I'd gotten to know over months and years. People who'd supported me through family conflicts and academic stress. People who knew my dreams and fears better than anyone in my physical world. The breaking point came on a particularly brutal Sunday dinner in March. I'd just posted a video that I was proud of. A collaboration with Alex where we'd discussed the art of world building in indie games. It had gotten more engagement than usual, and I was feeling optimistic about my channel's growth. I made the mistake of mentioning this at dinner, explaining how exciting it was to create content with someone whose creative vision aligned so perfectly with mine. Jessica literally laughed out loud. "Maya, you do realize these people aren't actually your friends, right? Like, you've never even met them. They're basically imaginary." My parents exchanged one of those looks that parents think kids don't notice, the kind that says, "We've been thinking the same thing but didn't want to hurt her feelings." "It's not healthy," my mom added gently, cutting into her chicken with surgical precision. "Spending so much time alone, talking to strangers online. You should join some clubs at school, maybe volunteer somewhere. Make connections with people you can actually meet for coffee." The suggestion hung in the air like an ultimatum disguised as motherly advice. They wanted me to abandon the community that had become my lifeline. The people who understood my weird sense of humor and my creative ambitions, in favor of forced interactions with classmates who saw me as the quiet girl who always sat in the back of lecture halls. I tried to explain what these relationships meant to me, how Alex had stayed up until 3 in the morning helping me brainstorm video ideas when I was feeling creatively blocked, how Beth had shipped me a care package full of my favorite books when I was stressed about finals, how Mike had created a custom intro song for my channel just because he wanted to support my content. But the more I talked, the more concerned they looked. To them, these gestures sounded like the behavior of internet predators, not genuine friends. They couldn't see past the lack of physical presence to recognize the emotional support and creative collaboration that defined these relationships. That night, I retreated to my garage feeling more isolated than ever. I opened Discord and found Alex online, working on a new digital painting while listening to lo-fi music. "Rough family dinner?" he asked, somehow picking up on my mood through my typing pattern. I told him about the conversation, about feeling like I was living in 2 different worlds that would never understand each other. "The people who matter will see what you're building," he wrote back. "And the people who don't see it yet might surprise you when your work speaks for itself." His words were exactly what I needed to hear, but they also highlighted the cruel irony of my situation. The person offering me the most genuine support and encouragement was supposedly imaginary, while the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally kept trying to convince me that my dreams were a waste of time. The months that followed were a study in contrasts. Jessica's channel continued to stagnate despite her professional equipment and our parents' enthusiastic support. She'd post perfectly edited beauty tutorials that got 37 views and lifestyle vlogs that showcased a life more curated than lived. She started getting frustrated with the algorithm, with the lack of engagement, with the other influencers who seemed to gain followers effortlessly while she struggled to break 4 digits. Her content felt soulless because it was created for the metrics, rather than for any genuine passion or message. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Meanwhile, my subscriber count was climbing steadily. The turning point came when I started a series called Real Talk Tuesdays, where I'd have honest conversations with my online friends about topics that mattered to us. We discussed everything from mental health to creative burnout to the challenge of building authentic relationships in a digital world. The series resonated with viewers who were tired of the artificial positivity that dominated most lifestyle content. People started commenting about how refreshing it was to see genuine friendship and vulnerability on their feeds. My comment section became a supportive community where viewers shared their own struggles with feeling misunderstood or isolated. The growth was gradual but consistent. I hit 1,000 subscribers in my 6th month, 10,000 by month 9, and 100,000 just over a year after starting. Each milestone felt surreal, but it also validated what I'd known all along. There was an audience hungry for authentic content and genuine community. My online friends were thrilled by my success, celebrating each achievement as if it were their own. Alex designed custom graphics for my milestone videos, Beth helped me brainstorm content ideas that played to my strengths, and Mike created special music for my subscriber celebration videos. Their support never felt transactional or jealous, unlike the increasingly tense dynamic with my family. As my channel grew, the family dinners became even more uncomfortable. My parents didn't know how to process my success because they'd never taken my work seriously enough to understand what I was actually achieving. They'd ask vague questions about whether I was making any money from this hobby, but seemed genuinely confused when I tried to explain sponsorship deals and ad revenue. Jessica's reaction was more complex and harder to navigate. She was simultaneously proud of my achievement and resentful that I'd surpassed her subscriber count, using what she still considered an inferior approach. "I don't get it," she'd say, scrolling through my latest video's comment section. "Your audio quality is still kind of bad, and you don't even wear makeup on camera. How are you getting more views than channels with way better production value?" The question revealed everything wrong with her understanding of content creation. She was so focused on the surface-level elements that she'd missed the most important ingredient: authenticity. My viewers didn't care that my garage studio wasn't perfectly lit, or that I sometimes stumbled over words during recording. They connected with the genuine passion I had for my topics and the real relationships I'd built with my collaborators. They could tell the difference between content created for engagement and content created from the heart. The real test came when I reached my first 1,000,000 subscribers. The milestone hit on a Thursday morning while I was working my shift at Bean There Cafe, the coffee shop where I'd been employed since starting community college. My manager, Sarah, was the only person in my physical world who'd consistently supported my YouTube journey. She'd let me take calls during breaks, had watched every single one of my videos, and even appeared as a guest in a few of my coffee chat segments. When the notification popped up on my phone, I showed her the screen with shaking hands. "Maya, that's incredible," she practically shouted, causing half the cafe to look our way. "You did it! 1,000,000 people care about what you have to say." Her excitement was infectious and genuine, a stark contrast to my family's reaction that evening. I'd planned to announce the milestone at Sunday dinner, but I couldn't wait. I called an impromptu family meeting and gathered everyone in the living room where Jessica usually filmed her lifestyle content. I have some news about my channel, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I hit 1 million subscribers today. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged another one of their looks, and Jessica's face went through a series of expressions that ranged from shock to something that might have been envy. "That's wow," my mom finally said, but her tone suggested she wasn't sure whether to be proud or concerned. "That's a lot of people watching you." My dad's response was more predictable. "What does that mean exactly? Are you making enough money to consider this a real job?" The question stung because it reduced my achievement to its monetary value, ignoring the community I'd built and the lives I'd apparently touched based on the messages flooding my inbox. Jessica's reaction was the most painful. She congratulated me, but it sounded forced, and she immediately pivoted to talking about her own content strategy and how she was planning to rebrand her channel to appeal to a wider audience. That night, I celebrated with the people who truly understood what this milestone meant. Alex, Beth, Mike, and about 50 other members of my Discord community joined a voice chat, where we talked for hours about the journey that had led to this moment. They shared their favorite moments from my videos, discussed how my content had impacted their own creative projects, and made plans for future collaborations. It was the kind of celebration I'd always imagined having with my family, full of genuine excitement and mutual support. These supposedly imaginary friends were more present and engaged than the people I shared a house with. The 1 million subscriber milestone changed everything, but not in the ways I'd expected. Brands started reaching out with sponsorship offers. Other creators wanted to collaborate, and my income from the channel finally exceeded what I was making at the coffee shop. I was able to upgrade my equipment, improve my studio setup, and even start paying my online friends for their contributions to my content. But the most significant change was internal. I finally had concrete proof that my dreams weren't delusional, that the community I'd built was real and valuable, and that the people who'd called my friendships imaginary had been the ones lacking imagination. The success also intensified the disconnect with my family. They started treating me differently, but it felt more like confusion than pride. My mom would introduce me to her friends as Maya, who has 1 million followers on the internet, like I was a exotic pet with an unusual trick. My dad began asking more detailed questions about my business model, suddenly interested in the financial aspects now that the numbers were impossible to ignore. Jessica's attitude became increasingly complicated. She was proud to have a successful sister, but she couldn't hide her frustration that I'd achieved everything she'd been working toward using methods she'd dismissed as unprofessional. The breaking point in our family dynamic came during a particularly tense conversation about my future plans. I'd been accepted to transfer to a 4-year university to study digital media, and I was considering whether to defer for a year to focus on growing my channel while the momentum was strong. My parents were horrified by the idea of postponing traditional education for what they still saw as an internet hobby, even with the 1 million subscribers and growing income. "This could all disappear tomorrow," my dad argued. "You need a backup plan, a real degree." My mom worried about what people would think if I dropped out of school to play on the computer full-time. Jessica's input was the most frustrating because it revealed how little she understood about what I'd actually built. "You're being kind of selfish," she said, adjusting her ring light while she talked. "You got lucky with the algorithm, but you're not exactly producing groundbreaking content. It's just you talking to your online friends. Anyone could do that." Her dismissal hurt because it minimized not just my work but the relationships that had made it possible. She still couldn't see my online friends as real people with valuable perspectives and talents. To her, they were just voices I talked to through a screen, not the collaborators and supporters who'd helped me create something meaningful. That conversation made me realize that my family might never understand what I'd accomplished or how I'd accomplished it. They were so invested in traditional markers of success that they couldn't recognize innovation when it was happening in their own garage. They wanted me to fit into boxes they understood: college, internships, corporate jobs, traditional career trajectories. The idea that I could build a business around authentic relationships and creative collaboration was foreign to their worldview, even when the results were undeniable. The irony wasn't lost on me that the people who'd spent 18 months calling my friendships imaginary were now benefiting from the very real success those friendships had made possible. My increased income meant I could contribute more to household expenses, and my growing platform had started attracting attention to Jessica's content through association. Several of my viewers had discovered her channel and subscribed, giving her the boost she'd been struggling to achieve on her own. But instead of acknowledging the role my supposedly fake relationships had played in creating these opportunities, my family continued to view my success as a happy accident, rather than the result of intentional community building and authentic content creation. As I sat in my garage studio that night, looking at the subscriber count that had just crossed the million mark, I realized I was living proof that the future of connection and community wasn't bound by traditional definitions. My online friends weren't imaginary. They were pioneering a new kind of relationship that transcended physical proximity. Together, we'd built something that mattered to millions of people, and we were just getting started. The people who couldn't see the value in what we'd created weren't lacking imagination, they were lacking vision. And vision, I was learning, was exactly what separated creators from followers, builders from spectators, and real friends from family members who loved you conditionally. The best part was knowing that this was only the beginning. With Alex, Beth, Mike, and the rest of my community by my side, there was no limit to what we could create together. My family might never understand the magic of authentic online relationships, but millions of other people did. And tomorrow, I had something even more special planned for them. The morning after hitting 1 million subscribers, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mom, and a text that simply read, "We need to talk now." Something in those capital letters made my stomach drop as I pulled on yesterday's jeans and walked across the driveway to the main house. I found my entire family gathered around the kitchen island, their faces wearing expressions I'd never seen before. My laptop was open in front of them, displaying my YouTube analytics dashboard that I'd carelessly left logged in the night before. The numbers were stark and undeniable. 1. 2 million subscribers, $847,000 in estimated yearly revenue, and a brand deal inbox that looked like a small business directory. Maya, my dad started, his voice taking on the tone he usually reserved for discussing taxes or insurance policies. We had no idea this was generating this kind of income. My mom was scrolling through collaboration requests from companies I'd only dreamed of working with 6 months ago. Energy drink brands, gaming peripheral manufacturers, even a streaming service that wanted to discuss an exclusive content partnership. Jessica sat silently in the corner, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like shock, mixed with resentment. The intervention that followed was surreal in its transparency. Suddenly, my imaginary friends were being discussed as business partners, and my computer hobby had transformed into a digital enterprise that required family oversight. My mom, who had spent months suggesting I needed therapy for my internet addiction, was now asking detailed questions about my content calendar and whether I had proper contracts with my collaborators. My dad wanted to know about tax implications, business registration, and whether I needed a manager to handle my growing list of opportunities. The shift in their language was as dramatic as it was revealing. Alex wasn't PixelDreamer anymore. He was your graphic designer in Canada. Beth had evolved from that book person you talked to into your content consultant. Mike was no longer some random guy with music software, but had become your audio production specialist. Overnight, my family had retrofitted their understanding of my relationships to match the financial reality of my success, but their newfound respect felt hollow because it was based entirely on dollar signs rather than the genuine connections I'd been trying to help them understand for months. Jessica's reaction was the most complex and painful to witness. For the first time since we were children, I saw her confidence crack completely. She'd spent 2 years building her channel with every advantage: professional equipment, parental support, a dedicated filming space, and access to family funds for props and clothing. Yet her subscriber count hadn't moved beyond 850 followers, while I'd somehow stumbled into 7-figure success from a converted garage with borrowed equipment and friends she'd dismissed as fictional characters. "I don't understand," she kept saying, refreshing my analytics page, as if the numbers might change if she looked at them enough times. "Your videos don't even look professional. Half the time you're just sitting there talking to people who aren't even on camera. How is this getting millions of views when my makeup tutorials barely crack 100? Her frustration was palpable, but it revealed the fundamental misunderstanding that had been driving her approach to content creation. She'd been creating videos for an algorithm rather than for an audience, focusing on technical perfection while ignoring the human connection that made content compelling. The family meeting that followed felt like a corporate restructuring rather than a conversation between relatives. My parents wanted to establish proper business practices for my channel, which translated to them having oversight over my content decisions, collaboration choices, and financial planning. They suggested bringing in my dad's accountant, setting up a business entity, and creating formal contracts with my online collaborators. While some of their suggestions made practical sense, the underlying message was clear. They trusted my success, but not my judgment about how to manage it. The most insulting part was their sudden concern about my online friendships. The same people who'd spent months warning me about internet strangers were now worried that I wasn't protecting myself adequately in business relationships with people I'd never met in person. "You need to be more careful about who you're working with," my mom cautioned, apparently forgetting that these were the exact same people she'd called imaginary just weeks earlier. "You should probably have contracts with all of them, and maybe we should run background checks." Their paranoia reached absurd levels when they discovered that Alex had been helping me with graphic design work without any formal payment arrangement. To them, this was evidence of either naivete on my part or manipulation on his. They couldn't comprehend that genuine friendship might motivate someone to contribute their skills without expecting immediate compensation, even though that kind of mutual support was exactly what had made my content special. The idea that creative collaboration could be based on relationship rather than transaction was foreign to their business-oriented mindset. I tried to explain that the informal nature of my collaborations was actually a strength, not a weakness. My viewers could tell the difference between authentic, creative partnerships and manufactured content designed to maximize revenue. The organic way my friendships had evolved into working relationships was part of what made my channel unique in a landscape full of obviously commercial content. But my family was convinced that my casual approach to business arrangements would eventually lead to exploitation or legal problems. The conversation took an even stranger turn when Jessica suggested that she could help me professionalize my content by lending her expertise in lighting, editing, and presentation. The offer might have seemed generous if it hadn't come with the implication that my current approach was amateur and needed improvement. She wanted to give my videos the polished look that had failed to attract viewers to her own channel, completely missing the point that my audience valued authenticity over production value. "People want to feel like they're hanging out with a friend," I tried to explain, "not watching a commercial for someone's lifestyle." But Jessica couldn't let go of her conviction that better equipment and more professional presentation would automatically translate to better results. She'd spent so much time studying successful influencers and copying their formats that she'd lost sight of what made content genuinely engaging. Her videos felt like performances because that's exactly what they were: carefully scripted and staged presentations designed to project an image rather than share genuine experiences or insights. The pressure to professionalize my approach intensified over the following weeks. My parents started attending my video calls with potential sponsors, treating brand negotiations like family business decisions rather than creative choices. They meant well, but their involvement changed the dynamic of conversations that had previously felt collaborative and exciting. Instead of discussing creative vision with brand representatives, we were suddenly focused on contractual details and revenue optimization. The joy of turning my passion into income was being replaced by the stress of managing family expectations about my newfound earning potential. Even more challenging was their insistence on meeting my online collaborators in person, or at least via video call. They wanted to put faces to the names that were generating revenue, as if visual confirmation would somehow validate relationships that had been meaningful to me for over a year. When I arranged a group video call with Alex, Beth, and Mike, my parents' behavior was embarrassingly corporate. They asked questions about professional backgrounds, discussed revenue-sharing arrangements, and treated my friends like employees rather than creative partners. Alex handled the interrogation with his usual grace, patiently explaining his background in graphic design and his genuine enthusiasm for collaborative content creation. Beth talked about her work as a librarian and her passion for connecting people with stories that mattered to them. Mike shared his experience as a music producer and his excitement about creating audio content that enhanced rather than overwhelmed video narratives. All three of them were articulate, professional, and clearly talented, but I could see that my parents were still struggling to understand how relationships formed online could be as meaningful as those developed through traditional social interactions. The most frustrating aspect of their newfound involvement was how it began to affect my content creation process. Instead of spontaneously planning collaborations based on creative inspiration, I was now expected to run ideas past a family committee that evaluated everything through the lens of business potential. My parents wanted me to prioritize partnerships with larger brands over smaller creators I was genuinely excited to work with. They pushed for more sponsored content and fewer passion projects, arguing that I needed to maximize my earning potential while my audience was growing. Their business-focused approach started to drain the enthusiasm that had made content creation feel like play rather than work. The informal brainstorming sessions with my online friends, which had always been the highlight of my creative process, became strategic planning meetings, where every idea was evaluated for its monetization potential. The spontaneous collaborations that had defined my most successful content were being replaced by calculated partnerships designed to optimize audience growth and revenue generation. Jessica's jealousy manifested in increasingly passive-aggressive comments about my success. She'd make observations about how lucky I was to have stumbled into the right niche at the right time, implying that my achievement was accidental rather than the result of consistent effort and authentic relationship building. Her resentment was particularly obvious when she talked about her own content struggles, constantly comparing her professional setup and technical skills to my humble garage studio and basic equipment. The family dynamic became increasingly uncomfortable as my parents tried to balance supporting both of their daughters' creative ambitions while clearly favoring the one that was generating significant income. They started suggesting that Jessica could benefit from collaboration with my channel, perhaps appearing as a guest in some videos or helping with behind-the-scenes content. The idea had merit in theory, but it felt forced and potentially damaging to the authentic community I'd spent months building. My viewers had connected with my content because it felt genuine and unscripted, not because it was polished or featured multiple personalities. Meanwhile, my online community was celebrating milestones and creating content with an energy that stood in stark contrast to the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. Alex had designed a series of custom graphics commemorating my million-subscriber achievement, turning the moment into visual art that captured the collaborative spirit of our creative partnership. Beth had written a thoughtful analysis of how authentic online communities were reshaping content creation, using my channel as a case study in the power of genuine relationship building. Mike had composed a special piece of music inspired by our creative journey, incorporating audio elements from some of our most memorable collaboration sessions. Their enthusiasm and creative generosity reminded me why I'd started making content in the first place. These relationships had never been about business potential or revenue generation. They'd been about finding like-minded people who shared similar creative visions and wanted to build something meaningful together. The fact that our collaborative efforts had resulted in financial success was wonderful, but it wasn't the primary motivation for any of us. We were artists and storytellers who happened to have found an audience, not entrepreneurs who'd stumbled into creative work. The contrast between my family's new attitude and my online community's consistent support became more apparent with each passing day. My parents were now interested in my work, but only insofar as it represented a business opportunity that needed proper management. Jessica was supportive but clearly struggled with the fact that my success had come through methods she'd criticized. My online friends remained exactly the same, creative, encouraging, and focused on the collaborative aspects of content creation that made the work fulfilling rather than just profitable. As my subscriber count continued to climb toward 2 million, the pressure from my family to treat my channel like a traditional business intensified. They wanted organizational charts, revenue projections, and strategic planning sessions that felt completely at odds with the organic growth that had brought me this far. They couldn't understand that the authenticity my audience valued was incompatible with the corporate approach they wanted to implement. The more they tried to optimize and systematize my creative process, the more I risked losing the genuine connection with my community that had made everything else possible. The breaking point came during a family dinner where my parents announced they'd been researching talent management companies that specialized in YouTube creators. They'd apparently been having conversations with several agencies without consulting me, comparing services and commission structures as if my creative output was a commodity that needed professional handling. The idea of having strangers manage my relationships with collaborators and my communication with audience members felt like a betrayal of everything that had made my channel special. "We're just trying to help you reach your full potential," my mom explained when she saw my horrified expression. "You've built something amazing, but you need professional guidance to take it to the next level." The suggestion stung because it implied that my current approach was somehow insufficient, despite having generated more success than anyone in our family had thought possible just months earlier. They couldn't see that professionalizing my creative process might optimize revenue but would inevitably damage the authentic relationships that were the foundation of my entire platform. That night, I called an emergency meeting with my core collaborators to discuss the pressure I was facing to corporatize our creative partnership. Alex, Beth, and Mike listened patiently as I explained my family's concerns and their suggestions for making our collaborative arrangements more formal and business-oriented. Their responses revealed exactly why our informal approach had been so successful and why changing it might be a mistake. "The moment we start thinking of this as a job instead of a creative outlet, we'll lose the spark that makes it special," Alex observed. "Your audience can tell when content is created from passion versus when it's created for profit. The second we start optimizing for revenue instead of for authenticity, we become just another corporate content channel." Beth agreed, noting that some of her favorite collaborative projects had emerged spontaneously from conversations that would never have happened in a formal business environment. Mike pointed out that the musical elements he contributed to my videos were inspired by the genuine friendship underlying our partnership, not by contractual obligations or payment schedules. Their perspective helped me realize that my family's business-focused approach, while well-intentioned, threatened to destroy the very qualities that had made my content successful. The informal, friendship-based nature of my collaborations wasn't a weakness that needed correction. It was the secret ingredient that differentiated my channel from the thousands of other creators trying to manufacture authentic-seeming content through marketing strategies and audience research. The conversation with my collaborators also reinforced how much more they understood about my creative vision than my own family did, despite having never met me in person. They recognized that my success was built on genuine relationships and authentic communication, not on technical excellence or professional presentation. They valued the collaborative aspects of our work more than the financial benefits, and they were committed to maintaining the creative integrity that had brought us this far together. As I ended the call and sat alone in my garage studio, surrounded by the humble equipment that had somehow generated millions of views and substantial revenue, I realized I was facing a choice between family approval and creative authenticity. My parents wanted me to succeed according to their definition of success, which emphasized financial optimization and professional management over artistic vision and relationship building. But everything I'd accomplished so far had come from following my instincts and prioritizing genuine connection over conventional business practices. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same family members who'd dismissed my online friendships as imaginary were now trying to turn those relationships into formal business arrangements. They still didn't understand that the magic of my content came from the fact that my collaborators were friends first and creative partners second. Any attempt to reverse that priority would fundamentally change the nature of our work together and likely alienate the audience that valued our authentic dynamic. Looking at my subscriber count, which was rapidly approaching 2 million, I knew I was at a crossroads that would determine not just the future of my channel, but the future of my relationships with both my family and my online community. The people who'd never believed in my vision were now trying to control it, while the people who'd supported me from the beginning were trusting me to make decisions that preserved what we'd built together. The choice seemed obvious, but making it would require standing up to family pressure in ways I'd never attempted before. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was editing my latest collaboration with Alex, a deep dive into the psychology of color theory in digital art. The subject line read, "Exclusive Partnership Opportunity, Maverick Media Management," and the sender was someone named Richard Blackstone, Senior Talent Acquisition Director. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another spam message from a company trying to capitalize on my growing subscriber base. Instead, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened what would turn out to be the most professionally flattering and personally insulting correspondence I'd ever received. The email was a masterclass in corporate seduction. Richard had clearly done his research, referencing specific videos from my channel and demonstrating an understanding of my content style that went beyond surface-level observation. He praised my natural talent for authentic engagement and my innovative approach to collaborative content creation. The language was sophisticated, and the compliments felt genuine, at least until I reached the section where he outlined what Maverick Media could do to elevate my brand to its full commercial potential. According to Richard's proposal, my current approach to content creation was charmingly amateur but fundamentally unsustainable at scale. He appreciated my organic growth and grassroots community building, but emphasized that serious creators needed professional guidance to navigate the complex landscape of brand partnerships, audience development, and revenue optimization. The email included a detailed breakdown of services that Maverick could provide: strategic content planning, professional collaboration management, brand relationship development, and what he called creator lifestyle optimization. The most telling part of the proposal was his analysis of my current collaborative relationships. Richard had somehow researched Alex, Beth, and Mike, describing them as talented but unmanaged creative resources who could benefit from, quote, professional relationship structuring. He suggested that my informal approach to collaboration, while personally fulfilling, was leaving money on the table and potentially exposing me to legal vulnerabilities. His solution involved bringing all of my creative partnerships under Maverick's management umbrella, ensuring that every collaboration was properly contracted, strategically planned, and optimally monetized. I forwarded the email to my parents without comment, knowing that it would validate every concern they'd expressed about my need for professional guidance. Their response was immediate and enthusiastic. My dad called within an hour, practically vibrating with excitement about the opportunity to work with a, quote, legitimate talent management company. My mom had already researched Maverick Media online and was impressed by their client roster, which included several creators with subscriber counts in the tens of millions. The family meeting that followed felt like a corporate board session, rather than a conversation about my creative future. My parents had printed out the entire email exchange, highlighted key passages, and prepared a list of questions about Maverick's services and fee structure. Jessica, who had been sulking about my continued growth while her own channel stagnated, was suddenly interested in whether Maverick might also represent smaller creators who were related to established talent. The pressure to accept Maverick's proposal was immediate and overwhelming. My parents presented it as a no-brainer business decision, emphasizing the company's experience with creators who had successfully scaled from my current level to global influencer status. They couldn't understand why I was hesitant about working with professionals who specialized in exactly the kind of growth I was experiencing. To them, my reluctance looked like stubborn pride or fear of success, rather than a legitimate concern about maintaining creative integrity. Jessica's support for the Maverick proposal was particularly painful because it revealed how completely she misunderstood what made my content successful. She enthusiastically endorsed Richard's suggestions about professional collaboration management, arguing that my informal relationships with Alex, Beth, and Mike were holding me back from bigger opportunities. You could be working with real influencers and established creators instead of these random people you met online, she argued, apparently forgetting that those random people had helped me build something she'd been unable to achieve despite every advantage. The conversation highlighted the fundamental disconnect between my family's understanding of success and my own creative vision. They saw my channel as a business that needed optimization, while I saw it as a community that needed nurturing. They wanted me to scale up and professionalize, while I wanted to maintain the authentic relationships that had made everything else possible. They couldn't comprehend that bigger wasn't necessarily better, especially if growth came at the expense of the genuine connections that were the foundation of my entire platform. That evening, I scheduled a video call with Alex, Beth, and Mike to discuss the Maverick proposal and get their perspective on professional management. Their reactions were immediate and unanimous. They were horrified by the idea of working through a talent management company that would inevitably prioritize profit over creative vision. Alex had actually worked with similar agencies in his graphic design career and warned me about how quickly professional management could transform authentic creative partnerships into sterile business relationships. The moment we start working through contracts and managers, we stop being friends who create together and become service providers in your business ecosystem, Alex explained. That changes everything about how we communicate, how we brainstorm, and how we approach creative challenges. The spontaneity that makes our collaborations special gets replaced by strategic planning and revenue optimization. His warning resonated because I'd already seen hints of this transformation in how my family was starting to view my creative relationships. Beth shared her own concerns about professional management based on her observations of the publishing industry, where authentic author-reader relationships often got filtered through marketing departments and publicity teams. The magic happens in the direct connection between creator and audience, she noted. Every additional layer of professional management creates distance between you and the people who actually care about your content. Your viewers connect with you because you feel accessible and genuine, not because you're perfectly marketed. Mike's perspective was particularly valuable because he'd worked with record labels that had similar approaches to talent management. They'll want to optimize everything for maximum revenue, which means your content calendar gets driven by market research instead of creative inspiration, he warned. Your collaborations get evaluated based on their potential for audience growth, rather than their artistic merit. Everything becomes a business decision, and the passion that created your success in the first place gets treated as a nice bonus, rather than the core value. Their unanimous opposition to professional management forced me to confront the choice I'd been avoiding. I could either maintain the authentic creative community that had brought me this far, or I could pursue the kind of optimized, professionally managed growth that my family was pushing for. The two paths seemed mutually exclusive, and choosing the first one would mean disappointing people who genuinely wanted what they thought was best for my career. The conflict came to a head during another family dinner where my parents had invited their financial advisor to discuss the business implications of the Maverick proposal. Dave Martinez was a competent professional who specialized in helping small business owners structure their operations for growth, but he understood content creation about as well as I understood municipal bond investments. He approached my YouTube channel like any other entrepreneurial venture, focusing on scalability, profit margins, and competitive positioning, without any consideration for the creative elements that made the business possible. Dave's analysis of my current approach was brutally practical and completely tone-deaf. He saw my informal collaborations as inefficient resource allocation, and my focus on authentic community building as a missed opportunity for aggressive audience acquisition. According to his calculations, professional management could potentially triple my revenue within 18 months by optimizing my content strategy, expanding my brand partnerships, and, quote, professionalizing my creative workflow. The numbers were impressive, but they were based on fundamentally changing everything that made my channel special. The most insulting part of Dave's presentation was his assessment of my online friendships. He'd reviewed some of my collaborative content and concluded that Alex, Beth, and Mike were talented but replaceable resources who could be easily substituted with more established creators if professional management demanded it. He suggested that my emotional attachment to these specific collaborators was a business liability that could limit my growth potential. According to Dave's analysis, successful creators needed to be willing to upgrade their partnerships as their platforms grew, treating creative relationships like any other business resource that could be optimized or replaced. Listening to Dave reduce my most meaningful creative relationships to line items in a business plan was a turning point in my understanding of what professional management would actually mean for my content and my community. He wasn't suggesting minor adjustments to improve efficiency. He was proposing a complete transformation of my approach to creation, collaboration, and audience engagement. The Maya Chen, who emerged from his optimization process, would be more profitable but fundamentally different from the person who had built this community in the first place. My parents were completely convinced by Dave's presentation, viewing it as definitive proof that I needed professional guidance to reach my full potential. They couldn't see that Dave's version of success would require abandoning everything that had made my current success possible. They were so focused on the financial projections and growth potential that they missed the fundamental contradiction in trying to scale authentic relationships through corporate optimization strategies. Jessica's reaction to Dave's presentation was particularly revealing because it exposed her ongoing resentment about my success. She enthusiastically endorsed his suggestions about replacing my current collaborators with more established creators, arguing that it would be a smart business move that could benefit everyone involved. "You could probably get some real influencers to work with you now," she suggested. people with their own followings who could bring their audiences to your channel. She still couldn't understand that the value of my collaborations came from genuine creative chemistry rather than audience size or social media influence. The pressure to accept the Maverick proposal reached its peak when my parents scheduled a conference call with Richard Blackstone without consulting me. They wanted to demonstrate their commitment to my professional development and show that our family took business opportunities seriously. The call was scheduled for the following Tuesday, and they expected me to participate enthusiastically and ask informed questions about Maverick's services and fee structure. I spent the weekend before the call in a state of creative paralysis, unable to work on content because I was so conflicted about the direction my family wanted me to take. The collaborative video I'd been editing with Alex sat unfinished on my laptop because I couldn't focus on the creative process while facing pressure to potentially end the relationship that had made the content possible. Every time I tried to write script notes or plan future collaborations, I found myself wondering whether this might be the last project I'd complete using my current authentic approach. The internal conflict was exhausting because both sides of the argument had merit. My family's concerns about professional management weren't entirely unreasonable. I was inexperienced with business negotiations, legal contracts, and strategic planning. Having professional guidance could potentially help me avoid mistakes and capitalize on opportunities that I might miss on my own. But their solution required changing the fundamental nature of my creative process and potentially sacrificing the relationships that had made my content special in the first place. Meanwhile, my online community was creating some of our best collaborative content yet, completely unaware of the pressure I was facing to professionalize our partnerships. Alex had developed a new visual style for my video thumbnails that perfectly captured the collaborative spirit of our content. Beth had written a series of thoughtful essays about online community building that were inspiring discussions across multiple platforms. Mike had composed a soundtrack for our upcoming project that elevated the emotional impact of our storytelling. Their continued enthusiasm and creative generosity stood in stark contrast to my family's business-focused approach to evaluating these same relationships. The night before the scheduled call with Richard Blackstone, I had a moment of clarity while reviewing analytics for my latest collaborative video. The comment section was filled with viewers expressing gratitude for the authentic friendships they witnessed in my content, with many people sharing how my approach to online relationships had inspired them to seek genuine connections in their own digital spaces. These weren't people who wanted me to scale up or professionalize. They were people who valued exactly what I was already providing. Reading through hundreds of comments from viewers who found meaning and inspiration in my content reminded me why I'd started creating in the first place. I hadn't set out to build a business empire or maximize revenue potential. I'd set out to share authentic experiences and build genuine community with like-minded people. The fact that this approach had generated financial success was wonderful, but it wasn't the primary goal. Professional management might optimize my earning potential, but it would inevitably change the nature of the content that my audience actually valued. The realization that my viewers connected with my current approach, rather than wanting a more polished version, gave me the clarity I needed to make a decision about the Maverick proposal. I wasn't creating content for business advisors or talent managers. I was creating it for people who appreciated authentic relationships and genuine creative collaboration. Any changes that optimized for business metrics at the expense of authentic connection would ultimately disappoint the audience that had made my success possible. That night, I called Alex, Beth, and Mike to let them know about the family pressure I was facing and the conference call that had been scheduled for the next day. Their support was immediate and unwavering, but they also made it clear that they would respect whatever decision I made about professional management, even if it meant ending our collaborative relationships. Their willingness to prioritize my well-being over their own creative interests was exactly the kind of genuine friendship that I knew I couldn't replace with professionally managed partnerships. "Whatever happens, we're proud of what we've built together," Alex said, his voice carrying the warmth that had made our friendship special from the beginning. "You've created something meaningful that's touched millions of people's lives. No business advisor can take credit for that, and no management company can replicate it through optimization strategies." Beth and Mike echoed his sentiment, emphasizing that our collaborative relationships had been fulfilling regardless of their business implications. Their unconditional support gave me the strength I needed to face the conference call with Richard Blackstone and make a decision that honored both my creative vision and my personal values. I knew that disappointing my family would be difficult, but I also knew that compromising my authentic approach to content creation would ultimately disappoint the audience and collaborators who had made everything else possible. The choice between family approval and creative integrity was clear, even if making it would require more courage than I'd ever needed before. As I prepared for what I knew would be a life-changing conversation, I felt grateful for the clarity that came from understanding what I truly valued. My online friendships weren't just business relationships or creative partnerships. They were genuine connections with people who shared my vision for authentic community building. Any decision that treated these relationships as replaceable resources was fundamentally incompatible with the values that had guided my content creation from the beginning. The conference call with Maverick Media was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and I knew that my response would determine not just the future of my channel, but the future of my relationships with both my family and my online community. The people who had never believed in my vision were now trying to control it, while the people who had supported me from the beginning were trusting me to make decisions that preserved what we'd built together. The irony wasn't lost on me, but the choice was clear. The conference call began at exactly 10 o'clock, with my entire family gathered around the kitchen table, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. Richard Blackstone's voice came through the laptop speakers with the polished confidence of someone who had delivered this pitch hundreds of times before. He opened with congratulations on my recent growth milestones and launched into a presentation that painted a picture of unlimited potential if I was willing to embrace professional guidance and strategic optimization. For 25 minutes, I listened to Richard describe a version of my future that sounded impressive and terrifying in equal measure. He outlined content calendars planned months in advance, collaboration schedules managed by professional coordinators, and brand partnerships selected through market research rather than creative inspiration. His vision involved transforming my garage studio into a professional production facility, hiring a team of editors and social media managers, and establishing clear business relationships with everyone who contributed to my content. My family hung on every word, occasionally nodding with approval when Richard mentioned revenue projections or audience growth potential. Jessica looked particularly engaged when he discussed opportunities for family members to become part of the expanded content creation team. My parents asked thoughtful questions about contract terms, commission structures, and the timeline for implementing Maverick's comprehensive management strategy. Throughout the presentation, I remained silent, absorbing the implications of everything Richard was proposing. His plan would undoubtedly generate more revenue and accelerate my audience growth, but it would also fundamentally transform the nature of my creative work and my relationships with collaborators. The spontaneous conversations with Alex, Beth, and Mike that had inspired my best content would be replaced by scheduled meetings managed by professional coordinators. The organic community building that had made my channel special would be superseded by algorithmic audience acquisition strategies. When Richard finished his presentation and asked for my thoughts, the room fell silent. My family looked at me expectantly, clearly anticipating enthusiastic acceptance of an offer they viewed as a dream opportunity. Instead, I took a deep breath and began to speak from a place of clarity I hadn't accessed in months of family pressure and business consultations. "Thank you for the comprehensive presentation, Richard," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "Your services sound impressive, and I understand why many creators find value in professional management. However, after careful consideration, I've decided that Maverick's approach isn't compatible with my creative vision or personal values." The silence that followed felt heavy with disbelief and disappointment. I continued before anyone could interrupt, explaining that my success had been built on authentic relationships and organic community building that couldn't be replicated through professional optimization. I emphasized that my audience valued the genuine nature of my collaborations, and that any attempt to systematize or professionalize these relationships would likely alienate the people who had made my growth possible in the first place. Richard's response was professionally diplomatic, but clearly frustrated. He acknowledged my perspective while suggesting that I might be underestimating the challenges of scaling creative businesses without proper guidance. He emphasized that many successful creators had initially resisted professional management only to embrace it later, when the demands of growth became overwhelming. His tone carried the subtle condescension of someone who believed he understood my business better than I did. My family's reaction was immediate and intense. The moment I ended the call, they launched into a coordinated argument about my decision, with each person expressing different aspects of their disappointment and concern. My dad focused on the financial implications, calculating how much potential revenue I was abandoning by refusing professional management. My mom worried about my ability to handle increasingly complex business negotiations without expert guidance. Jessica's response was the most personal, accusing me of self-sabotage and suggesting that I was afraid of real success. The argument that followed was unlike any conversation our family had ever had, because it forced us to confront fundamental differences in our definitions of success and creativity. My parents genuinely believed that bigger was always better, and that professional optimization was the natural evolution of any successful venture. They couldn't understand why I would voluntarily limit my growth potential to preserve relationships they still viewed as inherently inferior to traditional business partnerships. Jessica's frustration came from a different place but was equally intense. She had spent 2 years trying to achieve a fraction of my success, using exactly the kind of professional approach that Maverick was offering to provide. Watching me reject opportunities she would have embraced enthusiastically felt like a personal insult to her entire strategy for content creation. She accused me of taking my success for granted and being ungrateful for the support our family was trying to provide. The conversation reached its breaking point when my mom suggested that my attachment to my online collaborators was unhealthy and potentially damaging to my professional development. "You're prioritizing people you've never met over your own family's advice," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of hurt and exasperation. "These internet friends aren't going to be there for you when this whole thing falls apart." Her words crystallized everything that was wrong with my family's understanding of my creative journey and personal relationships. They still saw my online friendships as inferior substitutes for real connections rather than genuine partnerships built on shared creative vision and mutual respect. They couldn't comprehend that Alex, Beth, and Mike had been more consistently supportive of my creative growth than anyone in my physical environment had ever been. "You're wrong," I said, my voice carrying a conviction that surprised everyone in the room, including myself. "These people have supported my dreams when you called them imaginary. They've contributed their talents to my projects without expecting anything in return. They've celebrated my successes without jealousy and offered honest feedback without judgment. They've been better friends to me than anyone in this room has been willing to acknowledge." The truth hung in the air like a challenge that no one knew how to address. My family had spent months dismissing my online relationships as inferior to traditional social connections, but they couldn't argue with the results those relationships had produced. The people they'd called imaginary had helped me build something real and meaningful that touched millions of lives and generated substantial income. The contradiction was too obvious to ignore, but too uncomfortable to address directly. The silence that followed was broken by my dad's attempt to reframe the conversation around practical concerns. He acknowledged that my online collaborators had contributed to my success, but argued that personal sentiment couldn't override business logic indefinitely. As my channel continued to grow, he insisted I would need professional guidance to navigate increasingly complex challenges that my friends, however well-intentioned, weren't qualified to handle. His argument had logical merit, but missed the fundamental point about what made my content special. My audience didn't connect with my videos because they were professionally produced or strategically optimized. They connected because the relationships they witnessed felt authentic and inspiring. The moment I started treating my collaborators as business resources rather than creative partners, the magic that drew viewers to my content would disappear, regardless of how professionally the transition was managed. That afternoon, I retreated to my garage studio and called an emergency meeting with Alex, Beth, and Mike to process what had happened during the conference call and my family's reaction to my decision. Their response was immediate relief mixed with concern about the pressure I was facing at home. They'd been worried that family expectations might eventually force me to accept professional management that would end our collaborative relationships. "We're proud of you for standing up for what you believe in," Alex said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. It takes courage to reject what everyone else thinks you should want in favor of protecting what actually matters to you. Beth echoed his sentiment, emphasizing that my decision demonstrated the kind of integrity that had made our creative partnership meaningful from the beginning. Mike's perspective was particularly valuable because he'd worked with artists who had made similar choices between commercial optimization and creative authenticity. The industry will always try to convince creators that bigger is better, and that professional management is inevitable, he observed. But the artists who maintain their vision and protect their core relationships are usually the ones who create work that stands the test of time. Their support gave me the emotional foundation I needed to handle the ongoing tension with my family, but it also highlighted how isolated I'd become in my physical environment. The people who understood and supported my creative vision lived thousands of miles away, while the people I shared a house with were actively pressuring me to abandon the approach that had made my success possible. The situation was unsustainable and would require more decisive action than simply rejecting professional management offers. Over the following weeks, my family's disappointment about the Maverick decision manifested in subtle but persistent pressure to reconsider my approach to content creation. They stopped asking direct questions about my work, but made pointed comments about creators who had successfully scaled their businesses through professional partnerships. They forwarded articles about YouTube stars who had built media empires and suggested that I was limiting my potential by refusing to think bigger about my platform. Jessica's resentment became increasingly obvious as my subscriber count continued to climb toward 3 million, while her own channel remained stagnant. She started making passive-aggressive comments about my amateur approach and questioning whether my success was sustainable without proper business infrastructure. Her criticism stung because it echoed my family's concerns about my long-term viability as an independent creator. The pressure reached its peak when my parents arranged another family meeting to discuss my 5-year plan for the channel. They'd prepared a presentation comparing my current trajectory with other creators who had embraced professional management, showing projected revenue differences and growth potential. Their analysis suggested that my resistance to optimization was costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars annually and potentially limiting my ability to achieve the kind of cultural influence that top-tier creators enjoyed. Their presentation was thorough and professionally prepared, but it was based on the assumption that maximum growth and revenue were inherently desirable goals. They couldn't understand that I measured success differently, valuing creative fulfillment and authentic relationships over financial optimization and cultural influence. The life they were envisioning for me sounded impressive but emotionally empty, focused on business metrics rather than meaningful human connections. During that meeting, I made a decision that had been building in my subconscious for weeks. I announced that I was moving out of the family home and establishing my own space where I could create content without ongoing pressure to compromise my creative vision. The declaration shocked my parents, who hadn't realized how seriously their business-focused approach was affecting my mental health and creative process. "You're making a mistake," my mom said, her voice carrying genuine concern mixed with hurt feelings. "We're only trying to help you succeed. Moving out won't change the fact that you need better business guidance if you want to maintain your growth." My dad focused on practical concerns, questioning whether I could afford independent housing and whether isolation from family support would actually improve my creative output. Jessica's reaction was the most complex because it revealed both her ongoing jealousy and her genuine worry about our relationship. She accused me of being dramatic and suggested that I was overreacting to well-intentioned advice. But her criticism was undermined by obvious relief that my presence wouldn't be a constant reminder of her own creative struggles. The conversation that followed was painful but necessary, because it forced us to acknowledge fundamental differences in our values and priorities that couldn't be resolved through compromise or family meetings. My parents wanted me to succeed according to their definition of success, which emphasized financial achievement and professional recognition. I wanted to succeed according to my own definition, which prioritized creative fulfillment and authentic community building. The apartment I found was small, but perfect for my needs. A 2-bedroom space above a used bookstore in downtown Riverside. The location felt symbolic because it represented the kind of authentic, community-oriented environment where I'd always felt most comfortable. The bookstore's owner, an elderly woman named Margaret who had been running the business for 30 years, understood the value of building genuine relationships with customers rather than optimizing for maximum profit. Moving day was emotionally complex because it represented both liberation from family pressure and separation from people I genuinely loved, despite our creative differences. My parents helped with the practical aspects of relocating but maintained an air of disappointed resignation about my decision. Jessica's goodbye was particularly awkward because neither of us knew how to address the resentment and competition that had complicated our relationship for months. The first week in my new space was transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without constant family pressure to professionalize my approach, I rediscovered the joy of spontaneous content creation and organic collaboration with my online friends. Alex, Beth, and Mike were thrilled about my increased creative freedom and immediately began planning projects that would have been impossible under the structured approach my family had been advocating. My first video from the new studio was a collaboration with all three of my core creative partners, discussing the importance of authentic relationships in content creation. The response from my audience was overwhelmingly positive, with thousands of comments expressing appreciation for our genuine friendship and creative chemistry. Many viewers shared their own stories about finding meaningful connections online and building communities around shared interest rather than commercial opportunities. The video marked a turning point in my relationship with my audience because it explicitly addressed the tension between authentic content creation and commercial optimization. I talked openly about the pressure I'd faced to professionalize my approach and why I'd chosen to prioritize creative integrity over revenue maximization. The vulnerability in that content resonated with viewers who were facing similar choices in their own creative endeavors. 3 months after moving out, my channel crossed the 5 million subscriber milestone, proving that authentic community building could achieve remarkable growth without professional management or optimization strategies. The achievement felt more meaningful than previous milestones because it had been accomplished entirely on my own terms, without compromising the creative vision that had made my content special in the first place. My family's reaction to the 5 million milestone was complicated but ultimately positive. They were proud of my continued success, even if they didn't understand or approve of my methods. My parents began to acknowledge that my approach, however unconventional, was producing undeniable results. Jessica's attitude shifted from resentment to curious respect as she started asking genuine questions about my content strategy and community building techniques. The relationship with my family gradually improved as they accepted that my creative vision was fundamentally different from their business-oriented expectations. We established new boundaries that allowed them to express concern and offer advice without pressuring me to abandon the approach that had proven successful. They learned to celebrate my achievements without trying to control my methods, while I learned to appreciate their support without feeling obligated to follow their guidance. The most significant change was in how they viewed my online relationships. As my collaborations with Alex, Beth, and Mike continued to produce compelling content and generate positive audience response, my family began to recognize these partnerships as genuine friendships rather than imaginary connections. They started asking about my collaborators by name and expressing interest in their individual projects and achievements. By the time my channel reached 10 million subscribers, the transformation in my family's understanding was complete. They had witnessed firsthand how authentic relationships and creative integrity could build something more meaningful and sustainable than professionally managed optimization. They learned that success could be defined in multiple ways, and that my definition, while different from theirs, was equally valid and arguably more fulfilling. The 10 million milestone celebration was everything I dreamed it could be, a genuine party with people who had supported my vision from the beginning, rather than a business meeting focused on leveraging the achievement for future growth. Alex flew in from Toronto, Beth drove up from Oregon, and Mike traveled from Atlanta for our first in-person meeting after 2 years of online collaboration. My family joined the celebration, finally able to meet the people they'd once called imaginary, and to witness the authentic friendships that had made everything else possible. Looking back on the journey from my converted garage studio to 10 million subscribers, I realized that the most important decision I'd made wasn't about content strategy or business optimization. It was about trusting my own definition of success and having the courage to protect the relationships and values that made my work meaningful. The people who'd called my friends imaginary had learned to see them as real, but more importantly, I'd learned to trust my own vision even when everyone around me was suggesting a different path. My story isn't just about building a successful YouTube channel, It's about the courage to define success on your own terms, and the importance of protecting authentic relationships in a world that often values optimization over integrity. The friends my family once called imaginary turned out to be more real than many traditional relationships, and the community we built together proved that genuine connection can achieve remarkable things when it's nurtured with intention and protected from external pressure to conform. Today, my channel continues to grow through authentic community building rather than professional optimization, proving that there are multiple paths to success in the creator economy. My family has learned to support my vision, even when they don't fully understand it, and my online friendships have evolved into lasting partnerships that extend far beyond content creation. The garage studio, where it all began, is now a symbol of what's possible when you trust your own creative instincts and have the courage to build something meaningful, even when the people around you can't see the vision yet. The most rewarding aspect of my success isn't the subscriber count or the revenue it's generated. It's the knowledge that millions of people have been inspired to seek authentic connections and pursue their own creative visions. The comments section of my videos has become a community where people share stories about finding genuine friendship online, standing up for their creative values, and building meaningful projects with like-minded collaborators. That's the real measure of success. Not how big you can grow, but how much meaning you can create for yourself and others along the way. The email notification that changed everything arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in September, exactly 2 years after I'd moved into my apartment above Margaret's bookstore. I was awake because Alex and I had been working on a special project that had kept us both up past midnight, collaborating across time zones on something we'd been planning for months. The subject line read, "Invitation to Speak Digital Community Summit 2024, and the sender was Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Stanford University's Digital Communication Research Institute. Dr. Rodriguez had been following my channel for over a year, not as entertainment but as a case study in authentic online community building. Her research focused on how genuine relationships formed in digital spaces could create more meaningful engagement than traditional marketing-driven approaches to audience development. She wanted me to keynote the summit's opening session, speaking to an audience of researchers, tech industry leaders, and content creators about the principles that had guided my approach to building community rather than just accumulating followers. The invitation felt surreal because it represented academic and professional validation for methods that my own family had questioned for so long. Here was a respected researcher from one of the world's most prestigious universities, asking me to share insights about relationship-building techniques that had emerged organically from my desire to connect with like-minded people. The irony wasn't lost on me that the amateur approach my family had wanted me to professionalize was now being studied as an innovative model for digital communication. Reading through Dr. Rodriguez's email, I learned that my channel had become a frequently cited example in academic papers about authentic online community formation. Researchers were analyzing how my collaborative approach created stronger audience engagement than channels with larger subscriber bases, but less genuine interpersonal connection. My comment sections were being studied as examples of how authentic creator-audience relationships could foster supportive community dynamics rather than the toxic environments that plagued many large social media platforms. The academic attention was flattering but also overwhelming because it forced me to articulate principles that had developed intuitively rather than strategically. I'd never set out to revolutionize online community building. I'd simply wanted to create content with people I genuinely enjoyed collaborating with. The fact that this approach had generated both commercial success and scholarly interest suggested that authenticity in digital spaces was rarer and more valuable than I'd realized. Margaret, my landlord and unexpected mentor, was thrilled when I told her about the speaking invitation over our weekly coffee chat in the bookstore. At 73, she had built her own version of authentic community by creating a space where book lovers could gather, discuss literature, and form genuine friendships around shared interests. She immediately understood why researchers were interested in my approach, because she'd been using similar principles to build customer loyalty for decades. "You've created a digital version of what I've been doing here," she observed, gesturing around the bookstore where regular customers had formed reading groups, writing circles, and lasting friendships. "The difference is that your community exists online, but the principles are the same. Treat people like individuals rather than demographics. Prioritize genuine connection over profit maximization, and create space for authentic interaction rather than manufactured engagement." Her comparison helped me understand why my approach had resonated with so many people. In an increasingly commercialized digital landscape, my channel had become a refuge for viewers seeking genuine human connection rather than polished marketing messages. The collaborative relationships they witnessed in my content provided a model for how online interactions could be meaningful rather than transactional, inspiring rather than manipulative. Preparing for the Stanford Summit required me to analyze my own methods more systematically than I'd ever done before. I spent weeks reviewing old videos, analyzing comment patterns, and documenting the evolution of my collaborative relationships with Alex, Beth, and Mike. The process revealed how deliberately we'd prioritized authenticity over optimization, even when industry experts suggested that our informal approach was limiting our growth potential. The most interesting discovery was how our focus on genuine relationship building had actually accelerated growth compared to channels that relied on algorithmic manipulation or trend chasing. Our audience retention rates were significantly higher than industry averages because viewers felt emotionally invested in our collaborative dynamic rather than just entertained by individual videos. The trust we'd built through consistent authenticity translated into stronger engagement, more meaningful comments, and higher conversion rates for any products or services we endorsed. Alex, Beth, and Mike were excited about the speaking opportunity because it validated their own creative choices to prioritize collaboration over individual advancement. All three had received offers to start their own channels or join larger creator networks, but they'd chosen to continue our collaborative partnership because it provided creative fulfillment that individual success couldn't match. The academic recognition confirmed that their instincts about the value of authentic creative partnership had been correct. The Stanford Summit took place on a crisp October morning in an auditorium filled with people whose work shaped how millions of others interacted online. Technology executives, social media researchers, content creation educators, and fellow creators had gathered to discuss the future of digital community building. As I stood backstage, waiting for my introduction, I thought about how different this moment was from the family dinners where my work had been dismissed as a hobby involving imaginary friends. My presentation focused on three core principles that had guided my approach to community building: prioritizing relationship quality over audience quantity, maintaining transparency about collaborative processes, and treating viewers as individuals rather than demographic segments. I shared specific examples of how these principles had influenced content decisions, collaboration structures, and audience engagement strategies. The response was more enthusiastic than I'd expected, with audience members asking detailed questions about implementation strategies and scalability challenges. The most meaningful part of the presentation was when I introduced Alex, Beth, and Mike via video call, allowing the audience to witness firsthand the genuine friendship that had made our collaborative content special. Their articulate responses to questions about creative partnership and their obvious mutual respect demonstrated that authentic online relationships could be just as meaningful as traditional professional collaborations. Several audience members commented afterward that seeing our interaction had changed their understanding of what was possible in digital creative partnerships. Following the summit, invitations began arriving from universities, industry conferences, and creator education programs. My approach to community building had apparently filled a gap in how digital relationship formation was understood and taught. Traditional marketing and social media courses focused on audience acquisition and engagement optimization, but few educational programs addressed how to build genuine connections that benefited both creators and community members. The speaking opportunities led to consulting requests from companies trying to build more authentic relationships with their customers, and from individual creators seeking guidance on developing collaborative partnerships. I was careful about which opportunities I accepted, prioritizing organizations that shared my values about prioritizing relationship quality over pure growth metrics. The consulting work became an additional revenue stream that aligned with my core mission of promoting authentic digital community building. 6 months after the Stanford Summit, my channel reached 15 million subscribers, a milestone that felt different from previous achievements because it had been accomplished while simultaneously contributing to academic research and industry education. The growth had accelerated as my approach gained recognition in professional circles, proving that authenticity and commercial success weren't mutually exclusive when implemented thoughtfully and consistently. The academic and professional recognition also transformed my family's understanding of what I'd built. My parents had attended the Stanford presentation via livestream and were amazed to see their daughter being introduced as an expert in digital communication rather than someone with an unusual hobby. Hearing respected researchers and industry leaders discuss my methods as innovative and valuable forced them to reconsider their assumptions about the legitimacy of online relationship building. Jessica's perspective underwent the most dramatic transformation because she began implementing some of my community-building techniques in her own content creation. Instead of focusing exclusively on polished production values and trending topics, she started sharing more genuine aspects of her personality and building authentic relationships with her audience. Her subscriber growth accelerated significantly when she shifted from trying to impress viewers to genuinely connecting with them. The change in Jessica's approach led to deeper conversations between us about creativity, authenticity, and the courage required to share genuine vulnerability online. She acknowledged that her initial criticism of my methods had been motivated partly by jealousy and partly by fear that her more traditional approach wasn't working. Watching me succeed through authenticity had challenged her assumptions about what audiences actually wanted from content creators. By the channel's second anniversary in my independent apartment, the entire dynamic with my family had evolved into genuine support and mutual respect. They had learned to appreciate my approach, not because it generated revenue, but because it aligned with my values and created meaningful connections with millions of people. Their initial concerns about professional management and optimization had given way to pride in my ability to build something significant while maintaining personal integrity. The transformation wasn't just limited to my immediate family. Extended relatives, family friends, and even former classmates who had questioned my focus on online relationships began reaching out to learn about my methods. Some were seeking advice for their own creative projects, while others simply wanted to understand how I'd built such a strong community around authentic collaboration. The people who had once dismissed my online friends as imaginary were now asking for introductions to my collaborators. Margaret decided to modernize her bookstore by creating an online component that connected her physical community with readers around the world. She asked me to help design a digital platform that would maintain the authentic relationship-building principles that had made her bookstore special while extending its reach to people who couldn't visit in person. The project became a perfect synthesis of traditional community building and innovative digital connection strategies. Working with Margaret reinforced my understanding that the principles underlying successful community building were universal, regardless of whether relationships formed online or offline. Trust, mutual respect, genuine interest in others' well-being, and consistent authenticity were just as important in digital spaces as they were in physical environments. The main difference was that online communities required more intentional effort to overcome the barriers created by physical distance and technological mediation. The bookstore project also provided an opportunity to collaborate with Alex, Beth, and Mike on something beyond content creation. Alex designed the visual interface for the platform, Beth developed content strategies for connecting readers with appropriate book recommendations, and Mike created audio elements that enhanced the online browsing experience. Working together on a project that would benefit Margaret's community demonstrated how our creative partnership had evolved beyond my individual channel into a collaborative approach to solving meaningful problems. As my third year of independent content creation began, I started receiving messages from viewers whose lives had been significantly impacted by the community we'd built together. Teachers were using my collaborative approach to help students develop better communication skills. Small business owners were implementing authenticity-focused strategies to build stronger customer relationships. Individual creators were finding the courage to prioritize genuine connection over algorithmic optimization in their own content development. The most moving messages came from people who had struggled with social anxiety or isolation and found hope in watching genuine friendships develop through digital collaboration. Many viewers shared stories about reaching out to like-minded people online and discovering that meaningful relationships could indeed form across physical distances when approached with authenticity and patience. The community had become a model for how people could connect meaningfully in an increasingly digital world. 3 years after rejecting the Maverick Media proposal that my family had been so enthusiastic about, I received an email from Richard Blackstone requesting an interview about my success as an independent creator. His company had been studying creators who had achieved significant growth without professional management, trying to understand what made independent approaches viable in an industry increasingly dominated by corporate optimization strategies. The conversation with Richard was fascinating because it revealed how dramatically the industry's understanding of successful content creation had evolved. Management companies were beginning to recognize that authenticity couldn't be manufactured through professional optimization, and that genuine audience connection required approaches that couldn't be systematized or scaled through traditional business methods. Some of the most successful creators were those who had maintained authentic voices despite pressure to professionalize their approaches. Richard acknowledged that his original proposal to me had been based on assumptions about creator needs that didn't account for the value of authentic relationship building. He'd learned from studying independent creators that professional management could sometimes solve logistical challenges, but often at the expense of the genuine connection that made content compelling in the first place. The most successful management approaches were those that supported creators' authentic voices, rather than trying to optimize them for maximum commercial appeal. By the time my channel reached 20 million subscribers, the transformation in how online relationships were understood and valued had become cultural as well as personal. Academic research, industry analysis, and creator education programs increasingly emphasized the importance of authentic connection over purely metrics-driven growth strategies. My approach had contributed to a broader shift toward valuing relationship quality over audience quantity in digital community building. The success story wasn't just about subscriber growth or revenue generation. It was about proving that authentic human connection could thrive in digital environments when approached with intention and integrity. The friends my family had once called imaginary had become research subjects, collaborators, and inspirations for countless others seeking meaningful community in online spaces. The relationships that began as casual Discord conversations had evolved into partnerships that were changing how people understood the potential for genuine friendship across digital platforms. Looking back on the journey from my parents' garage to speaking at major universities about digital community innovation, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about content creation strategies or audience development techniques. It was about having the courage to trust your own values when everyone around you is suggesting a different path, and about recognizing that the relationships other people dismiss as unimportant might actually be the foundation for something extraordinary. The garage studio where everything began still exists, now converted back into storage space for my parents' seasonal decorations and Jessica's old ring lights. But sometimes when I visit home, I sit in that space and remember the young woman who spent countless hours talking to her computer screen, building friendships that no one believed were real. She couldn't have imagined that those conversations would eventually reach millions of people and change how families, researchers, and industry professionals understood the potential for authentic connection in digital spaces. The most rewarding aspect of the entire experience isn't the recognition or financial success. It's knowing that millions of people have been inspired to seek genuine connection rather than settling for superficial online interactions. The comment sections of my videos have become spaces where people share stories about finding real friendship through digital platforms, building creative partnerships across continents, and having the courage to prioritize authenticity over optimization in their own creative endeavors. Today, when young creators ask for advice about building sustainable careers while maintaining personal integrity, I tell them what I wish someone had told me during those early family dinners, when my dreams were dismissed as unrealistic. The people who can't see your vision aren't necessarily wrong about the challenges you'll face, but they might be wrong about what's possible when you stay true to your values and trust in the power of genuine human connection. Sometimes the most important relationships in your life begin with strangers on the internet, who share your passion for creating something meaningful together. The friends who were once called imaginary turned out to be more real than many traditional relationships, and the community we built together proved that authentic connection can achieve remarkable things when it's nurtured with intention and protected from external pressure to conform to conventional expectations. That's the real lesson of my story, not that online relationships are superior to offline ones, But that meaningful connection can happen anywhere when people approach each other with authenticity, respect, and genuine interest in building something valuable together. The documentary crew arrived at my apartment on a warm Thursday morning in May, their equipment filling Margaret's bookstore below, with an energy that reminded me of my earliest days filming in the garage. The director, Sarah Kim, had been following my story for 18 months as part of a broader exploration of how digital relationships were reshaping human connection in the 21st century. What had started as a segment about unconventional content creators had evolved into a feature-length examination of my journey from family outcast to industry pioneer. Sarah's initial interest had been sparked by academic papers citing my work, but her focus shifted when she discovered the personal cost of challenging traditional assumptions about relationships and success. The documentary wasn't just about building an online community. It was about the courage required to define meaningful connection on your own terms, when everyone around you insists you're wrong. The film would premiere at Sundance in January, but Sarah wanted to capture one final interview that would serve as the project's emotional conclusion. Sitting in the apartment where I'd found creative freedom 3 years earlier, surrounded by the evidence of everything I'd built through authentic collaboration, I reflected on how dramatically my understanding of family, friendship, and success had evolved. The young woman who had moved out in frustration and disappointment had become someone who could appreciate her family's love while maintaining boundaries around their expectations. The relationships they'd dismissed as imaginary had proven more enduring and supportive than many traditional connections. The most significant change wasn't in my external circumstances, but in my internal relationship with validation and approval. The early years of my channel had been driven partly by a desire to prove my family wrong about the value of online friendships and digital community building. Success had provided that proof, but it had also revealed that seeking external validation, even when successful, couldn't provide the sustainable satisfaction that came from alignment between personal values and daily actions. Margaret had become an unexpected guide in this evolution, sharing wisdom gained from decades of building community around shared interests rather than commercial objectives. Her bookstore had thrived not because she optimized for profit maximization, but because she created space for genuine connection between people who might never have met otherwise. Watching her maintain authenticity while adapting to changing circumstances had taught me that sustainable success required staying true to core values while remaining flexible about methods and strategies. The documentary interview became an opportunity to articulate insights that had emerged gradually through years of navigating the tension between commercial opportunity and creative integrity. Sarah's questions pushed me to examine not just what I'd accomplished, but how the process had changed my understanding of what was worth accomplishing. The conversation revealed that my journey had been as much about learning to trust my own judgment as it had been about building a successful channel. During the filming, Alex visited from Toronto for what had become our annual in-person collaboration session. Watching Sarah document our creative process provided perspective on how naturally our partnership had evolved from casual online friendship to professional collaboration without losing the authentic connection that made our work special. The camera captured something that couldn't be manufactured through strategic planning: genuine mutual respect and creative chemistry that enhanced both our individual abilities and our collaborative output. Beth joined us via video call from her new position as head librarian at a progressive library system that had implemented digital community building strategies inspired by our work. Her professional success provided evidence that the principles underlying our creative partnership had applications beyond content creation. She'd used authenticity-focused relationship building to transform her library from a traditional book repository into a dynamic community center that connected people across generational and cultural boundaries. Mike's contribution to the documentary session came through a musical composition he'd created specifically for the film, incorporating audio elements from our 3 years of collaborative content. Listening to the piece revealed the emotional arc of our creative journey, from tentative early conversations to confident collaborative innovation. The music captured something about our partnership that words couldn't express: the intangible magic that occurred when creative people trusted each other enough to be vulnerable in service of shared vision. The documentary interview forced me to confront questions about the sustainability and scalability of authenticity-based approaches to content creation and community building. Sarah wanted to understand whether my methods could be taught to other creators, or whether they were dependent on specific personality traits and circumstances that couldn't be replicated. The question revealed ongoing tension between authentic relationship building, which was inherently personal and organic, and educational approaches that attempted to systematize and scale successful strategies. My response emphasized that while specific tactics could be taught, authentic community building required genuine care for other people's well-being that couldn't be manufactured through strategic planning. The creators who successfully implemented similar approaches were those who already valued relationship quality over audience quantity and were willing to prioritize long-term connection over short-term growth metrics. The principles could be shared, but the commitment to authenticity had to come from individual creators' personal values rather than external pressure or commercial incentives. Reflecting on my family's evolution throughout the documentary process revealed how dramatically their understanding of success and relationships had changed. My parents had learned to appreciate achievement that didn't fit traditional professional categories, while Jessica had discovered that authentic self-expression could be more commercially successful than manufactured perfection. The process hadn't been easy for any of us, but it had ultimately strengthened family relationships by establishing mutual respect for different approaches to creativity and success. The most profound change was in how we communicated about creative work and personal relationships. Conversations that had once been dominated by concerns about professional viability and financial security now included discussions about personal fulfillment, creative integrity, and the importance of alignment between values and actions. My family had learned to ask different questions about my work, focusing on satisfaction and growth, rather than just metrics and revenue. Jessica's transformation had been particularly dramatic because she'd experienced firsthand how authenticity-focused approaches could accelerate rather than limit creative success. Her subscriber growth had surpassed her previous achievements when she shifted from trying to impress viewers to genuinely connecting with them. The change had required courage because it meant abandoning strategies that felt safe and predictable in favor of vulnerability that could either deepen connection or invite criticism. As the documentary crew prepared to leave, Sarah asked one final question that had been implicit throughout our conversation. What would I tell my younger self, sitting in that garage studio, feeling isolated and misunderstood? The question brought tears to my eyes because it connected me to the person I'd been before. Success provided external validation for choices that had once seemed foolish or naive. I would tell her that the relationships others dismissed as imaginary would become the foundation for something more meaningful than she could currently envision. I would assure her that the creative instincts leading her to prioritize authenticity over optimization were worth trusting, even when experienced professionals suggested different approaches. Most importantly, I would remind her that the approval she was seeking from family members who couldn't understand her vision was less important than the approval she could give herself for staying true to her values, despite external pressure. The documentary's completion marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The film would introduce my story to audiences who might never have encountered my content, but could benefit from understanding that meaningful success could take many forms. More personally, the process had provided an opportunity to reflect on growth that had occurred gradually and might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Standing in Margaret's bookstore after the crew departed, surrounded by evidence of authentic community built around shared interests, I felt grateful for every person who had challenged my assumptions about relationships, success, and the possibilities for connection in digital spaces. The family members who had questioned my choices had ultimately helped me develop conviction about my values. The online friends they'd called imaginary had become collaborators in building something that touched millions of lives. The garage studio where everything began had been demolished to make way for my parents' new garden, but the lessons learned in that converted space continued to influence every aspect of my creative work. The young woman who had been sleeping on a couch while building friendships through computer screens had become someone who could speak with authority about the future of human connection in increasingly digital environments. The most lasting impact of my journey wasn't the subscriber count or revenue generated, but the demonstration that authentic relationships could thrive across any distance when nurtured with intention and protected from pressure to conform to others' expectations. The community we'd built together had become proof that genuine human connection was possible anywhere people approached each other, with honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. Today, when creators ask about building sustainable careers while maintaining personal integrity, I share what I learned from choosing authenticity over optimization. Success defined by external metrics can disappear overnight, but success built on genuine relationships and aligned values provides satisfaction that persists regardless of changing circumstances. The friends who start as strangers on screens can become the most important relationships in your life when you approach them with the same care and respect you'd offer to people in your physical environment. The story that began with a family dismissing online friendships as imaginary became evidence that imagination, when applied to envisioning new possibilities for human connection, could create realities more meaningful than anyone initially thought possible. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust your own vision of what relationships and success could look like, especially when everyone around you insists you're wrong. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.